I'm Greg from Pedro Santa Maria Style Barbecue in Tracyton, Washington. Today we're going to make salsa. Our salsa is hand-cut pico de gallo style salsa. We just call it salsa, but if you want to call it pico de gallo, that works as well. The equipment we're going to use and the ingredients we're going to use to make our salsa are all right in front of you. We're going to start by using tomatoes and cutting them up by hand. We typically use Roma tomatoes, but you can also use something like a beefsteak or a hot house tomato, and that'll work just great. So for our tomatoes, like I said, we like Roma tomatoes, and that's what we're cutting here today. There's two ways to cut our tomatoes. First, if you're going to be cutting them by hand with your only two tools being your hand and a knife, we cut them like this. We're going to start by doing vertical cuts. And then we're going to turn our tomato 90 degrees and cut in the other direction. Note, I'm not cutting all the way down. I'm only cutting to about 1/4 inch from the bottom of the tomato. Take one side of the tomato and cut the bottom off. As you can see, I've got a flat bottom here on the tomato. And then I'm going to turn it this way on my cutting board. I'm going to make slices. That's going to leave me 1/4 to 1/8 inch cubed tomatoes. Everybody can see that slice there. That's about the size we're looking for. And then this piece I cut right here, I'll just evenly slice that up to go with the rest of the mix. Then from there, I'll take my tomato and put it in my bowl. Now, we sometimes make our salsa 6-8 gallons at a time, and so it's not efficient to hand cut them like that. So what we'll do is we'll use this Vollrath Instacut 2000 food cutter to cut it up. That way, when we're doing that, it's a totally different style of cut. A horizontal cut where I don't cut all the way through, but I'm cutting down in a horizontal cut. You can see it doesn't cut all the way through. And then what I'll do is I'll cut it in half, and see this half that I've cut horizontally, I'll put it on my Vollrath, and then that's going to give me these nice 1/8 to 1/4 inch size cuts. I'll do that with all of my tomatoes, and then I'll put the tomatoes in my dish. I like a nice measured dish, but you can use any bowl, like one of these glass Pyrex bowls will work just fine. The real thing on the tomatoes is you want to make sure that you have an even cut size, and you want to make enough tomatoes as to where 50% of the volume of your salsa is going to be tomatoes. Next ingredient we're going to put in there is our purple onions. Now, we choose purple onions versus other onions for a couple reasons. One, the color works great in our salsa. Two, the flavor of a purple onion blends a little bit better with the peppers and the tomatoes than other onions do. If you don't have access to a purple onion, I recommend using something like a Vidalia onion or a sweet yellow onion, something that's going to give you that good flavor. I still think the color's a little bit wrong if you don't go with purple. But purple's the best onion to use in our opinion. Okay, so when we're cutting our onion, a couple different ways to do it. Either way, we're going to have long horizontal cuts, looking for about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch thick. And then I always start from the top, because if you start from the bottom, generally when you cut that bottom, it's gonna be pretty pungent. You're gonna start crying, and you're gonna need a tissue. Thank you. And you know, you never want to have to use a tissue when you're in the middle of making your salsa. Thank you very much. You can take that. Okay, so once I get my onions cut about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch thick. Once again, two ways to do it. If you're going to dice it up yourself, just cut it very, very fine, and then use the knife to cut it as small as you can. If you have an industrial strength cutter like a Vollrath, get it in there, get it cut up. Once again, about 20% level of your total volume of salsa is going to be those purple onions. So when you get your purple onion all cut up, you want those nice 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch square pieces. And like I said, about 20% of your total volume of your salsa, you want to be your purple onions. Just throw it in there, and then next we'll move on to doing our peppers. So for our bell peppers, they do some key things for us. One, they provide a great texture inside your salsa. They give you a little bit of crunch in the salsa, which is key for a salsa that feels real good as you're eating it. Goes well on a sandwich, goes well in a burrito. Now, in terms of the types of bell peppers that we use, it's purely a matter of how much color you want and what type of color you want inside your salsa. Our ratio is we generally go 2 of the green peppers and then 1 of a yellow a red, or an orange pepper. Some sort of ratio like that over your gallon of salsa that we're making here today will give you that good color, give you that good flavor that you get from the bell peppers. When you're cutting the bell peppers, make sure you don't get any of the seeds in there. They'll be bad for the texture and they'll be bad for the flavor of your salsa. You can cut a bell pepper in a variety of ways. The big thing is this, is you want to make sure that you get 1/8 to 1/4 inch square pieces of bell pepper. You know, nothing bigger than that. If they're too big, they're going to create flavor clumps inside your salsa, just kind of ruin the entire experience. When you're done cutting your peppers, like I said, you want something a little bit smaller than the onions you cut up, a little bit smaller than the tomatoes, but not that much. And you want your color palette to basically be about half green and then the rest either your orange or yellow and your red. You're going to put that in your mix, and then once we mix it all together, it's going to give you that nice color that you're looking for. A little bit of orange and yellow and red inside the with the tomatoes and the purple onions, give you a great color. The next ingredient is our jalapeno peppers. This is where our salsa gets its heat. The amount of heat that you have in your salsa is really relative to how much jalapeno you put in there. Generally, what we're going to go through with a 1 gallon tub of salsa like this, I'm going to go anywhere from 4 to 6 jalapenos, depending on the size of the jalapenos and how hot the actual jalapenos are themselves. Now, when I'm cutting jalapenos, key thing, make sure you're wearing gloves. Now, because we're served food for the public, we always wear gloves when we're preparing it. That's what the health department requires of it. But even when you're doing it at home, go ahead and get some plastic gloves. You can even use some dishwashing gloves. Put those on before you start handling the jalapenos. If you're only going to cut 1 or 2 jalapenos, probably not a big deal. Any more than that, once you start cutting them up, you're going to get that capsaicin on your hands, and what that's going to cause is you're going to get burns in your skin. You're generally not going to feel them until a couple hours later, but the next day your hands can hurt quite a bit if you cut up a bunch of jalapenos just barehanded. So how am I going to cut this thing? First thing I'm going to do is cut the cap off, and then I'm going to cut my jalapeno in half. From there, get a spoon, a small spoon, roughly the width of the pepper itself, and then scoop all those seeds in the middle out. You have to get the seeds out. If you have the jalapeno seeds inside your salsa, it will ruin the salsa. Obviously, you have the texture issues we discussed earlier with those bell pepper seeds, avoiding having those in your salsa. But the jalapeno seeds, a lot of the heat, a lot of that capsaicin, the chemical that gives you the heat, is inside the seeds. You don't want those in there. Other thing with your jalapenos, cut them extremely fine. You want as fine a cut as you can get on there. I cut them real thin and then slice them again. And no bigger than half the size of your jalapenos, or a quarter, or your bell peppers, or a quarter the size of the purple onions or tomatoes that are in your salsa. Okay, so once we have all our jalapenos cut up, remember they're half the size of your bell peppers, a quarter the size of what you cut up your onions and tomatoes to. You're going to put those in with the rest. Should be about 5% of your total volume. You should have about 95%, if not more, of your volume in your bowl right now. Finally, the last thing we're going to add is going to be cilantro. Okay, cilantro is going to give it a good flavor. Biggest thing with cilantro when you're prepping it to consider is this: is you got to make sure you wash your cilantro really well. Cilantro, doesn't matter where the market you get it from. At least half the time you're going to find a good amount of dirt on the cilantro. Make sure you wash that off very well in a sink before you cut it up. Get all the dirt off of there. Dirt will not make your salsa taste good no matter where it's from. Now when you're cutting your cilantro, probably the only real consideration is this: is one, you have to make sure that it's cut very, very fine, and two, we generally use about half the stem. So of the full stem size of the cilantro, we're going to cut about half that stem off. We don't want that much crunchy cilantro in there. We want a little bit. And then the rest of the cilantro, along with all the leaves, we're going to cut that up as fine as we possibly can. First by just cutting into pieces, and then cross-cutting it until it's really, really fine. And then once all the cilantro is cut up, we're going to add that in there. It's going to, once again, give you that nice green flavor or color that's going to contrast with the tomatoes. The other thing that it's going to do for you, it's going to give you that nice aroma and real good smell and taste that you get from the cilantro. Blends perfectly with the tomatoes, onions, and peppers. Okay, so for your cilantro, it has to be cut very fine. Probably the best measure for having cut the cilantro fine enough is there should be no recognizable leaf parts in there. If you can't recognize any of it as a whole leaf anymore, then you've cut it fine enough. Once you've cut it super fine, just go ahead and scrape it off the board with the rest of your salsa mix, and you have all the major ingredients in there. Once you have all your main ingredients inside your dish that you're going to prepare your salsa in, and I recommend, once again, using a graduated dish to help you with the measures, then you're going to add your lime juice. What's the lime juice going to do for you? It's going to give your salsa that tang. It's going to help you mix it all together because it's going to lubricate the whole mix, provide a little bit of viscosity in there. And it's also a bit of a preservative with the citric acid. Now, if you're going to plan on not eating all of your salsa in one sitting, you're going to want it to last a couple days, I recommend that you add some red wine vinegar to your lime juice. What the red wine vinegar is going to do, it's going to give it that same tangy flavor, slightly different just because vinegar and citrus are a little bit different, but it's a natural preservative. It's going to help. If you're going to eat all of your salsa in one day, I generally leave the red wine vinegar out. You don't necessarily need it. If I'm going to use it, what I do is I pour my lime juice into a clear dish, and then I add just enough of the red wine vinegar so it starts to change the color a little bit. And at that point, maybe just a little bit more, I've got enough. From there, I'm going to take my lime juice and I'm going to add it to the salsa mix. And notice, how much do I add? When I can see the liquid move to the top of where all the vegetables are, that's generally how much I need. Okay, the next step, I'm going to do just a short preliminary mix to get it mixed up. This is why you always want to use a clear container for this, because what I want to see is all the color blending in to where those red tomatoes are at the bottom. Once I got my short preliminary mix, I've just got the very beginnings of a mix on there. That's when I'm going to add the spices. Now, I'm not going to go into exact portions for the spices. We really don't use exact portions anyway. And you know, there's a bit of a family secret we don't want to give up here. But the general spices we're going to use. The first one is going to be garlic salt. You know, your standard garlic salt that you get at the store that has a little bit of parsley in there, that's what you want to use. You can put quite a bit of it in there. What you want to be able to do is, after you mix it all up, and once you take a spoonful of the salsa, you want to be able to see those little white flecks of garlic salt in there. The second thing you're going to add is pepper. Now be careful. You don't want a lot of pepper in your salsa. Just a little bit to give it just the slightest bit of that peppery flavor, but not a lot. Very little pepper. You can see for this gallon portion, I have maybe less than a tablespoon of pepper. The final thing you're going to add, and probably the critical thing you're going to add, the nice part is it's really hard to put too much of it in there, is cumin. Cumin's going to give your salsa a great flavor. And add a bunch of the cumin in there, and then how do you know you have enough? I want you to be able to stand roughly an arm away from your salsa, inhale as hard as you can, and taste the cumin. Smell the cumin as it's coming off the salsa. You can't put too much cumin in there. Put a bunch in there. Once you have all your spices in there, now you just mix it. Get it mixed up. You want to have, so you have an even color distribution, red, purple, green, the orange and yellow or the red for the bell peppers, mixed evenly all up and down the container that you're using. Spin it all the way around. Make sure you don't have any pockets of just tomato or pockets of just onion or just pepper. Get it all mixed together. So once you've finished mixing your salsa, there's a couple tests to make sure you've got it where you want it. First of all, can I look at it, grab a spoon, and I want you to name every ingredient that's in the salsa by what you're seeing here. So I can see onions, I can see tomato, I can see yellow bell pepper, green bell pepper, I can see the small pieces of cilantro and a little bit of jalapeno. If I can see every ingredient in a random spoonful, I've mixed it well enough. The second thing I want to do is just look at my clear container. Do I see pockets of red pockets of tomato, purple pockets of onion? Do I see clumps of cilantro? If I see any of those things, I need to mix it some more. Finally, some good tests for your spices without having to taste it. First of all, when I pull a spoonful, I want to see the little white dots from my garlic salt, and I want it to have changed color to a slightly darker, almost brown color from the cumin. I want to see those two things. Okay, the other thing that I want is, if I had to pick a dominant smell as I stand an arm length away, I want to have that dominant smell to be the cumin with just a hint of garlic, and then obviously that tomato vegetable smell should be in there on the background. If you have those, you're pretty good. Now, this is not the final product. Your salsa's not done yet. Probably the most important step for your salsa is to put a lid on it and go put it in your refrigerator and watch 2 football games or do something that's going to be 5 to 6 hours. Let it set for a little while. If you have 12 to 18 hours for it to set, i.e. you can do it after dinner the night before you're going to have a barbecue or serve it so it sits overnight, it's going to be even better. So thank you very much for watching us make salsa today. I hope your salsa at home turns out great. If you want to come try ours, you can find us at farmers markets all over the Kitsap Peninsula, including Bremerton and Poulsbo. Our contact info is right behind us. You can also come visit our website at www.pedrosmbbq.com. Enjoy great salsa.